What if an entire river vanished beneath the desert thousands of years ago, only to be rediscovered from space, flowing invisibly past the world's most famous pyramids? What if satellite eyes peeled back the dunes to expose lost highways, collapsed fortresses, and ritual landscapes so vast they can only be understood from the sky? Stay with us until the end to find out about the buried waterway that may explain how Egypt's pyramids were supplied and why this single revelation could change how we tell the story of ancient engineering forever. From orbit, deserts are not empty. They're palimpsests, layered with forgotten roads, dry riverbeds, and stone geometries the wind has tried to erase, but never quite. Can satellites don't merely take pictures, they read temperatures, elevations, microwave echoes, and moisture signatures, letting us sense what's buried just below the surface and what once stood in places that now look lifeless to the naked eye. In the past decade, this remote archaeology has rewritten maps of trade, ritual, and water across North Africa and Arabia, and it is doing something even more radical, connecting climate and landscape change to the rise and fall of civilizations in ways we could never prove from ground level alone. Today, we'll journey from the empty quarters, ghost roads, to Arabia's stone megastructures, and from collapsed desert fortresses to a vanished Nile branch that threads the entire pyramid belt, an ending that reframes one of history's biggest logistical mysteries. When sunlight washes a desert plain, the ground can look stubbornly uniform, an unbroken sheet of glare from horizon to horizon. But satellites layer perspectives. Optical images catch faint tonal changes, where buried walls and compacted roads alter the grain of the surface. Thermal sensors note how subsurface stone heats and cools differently than loose sand. Radar, especially synthetic aperture radar, sends microwaves that can penetrate dry sediments and bounce back with telltale signatures from smooth, filled channels in hardened construction beneath the dunes. Stitch those layers into time series, and you start seeing through a living veil, dunes migrating, windrows shifting, and beneath them, the unchanging lines of human intention. In the early 1990s, NASA's space shuttle lofted a radar system that could peer into the skin of deserts, and over southern Oman, it picked up something uncanny: wide, diffuse streaks that converged on a single point in the middle of nowhere. On the ground, archaeologists found ruins at Shisr, a fortress at an ancient desert waterhole linked to the long-told legend of Ubar, the Atlantis of the sands, caravan hub of the frankincense trade. The fortress itself is too small to glow on shuttle radar, but the roads are not. They appear as parallel smudges where thousands of hooves and wheels compacted the desert over centuries, lines that modern tracks still echo because the best route through the dunes hasn't changed in 3,000 years. Later, work with Landsat and commercial satellites mapped these caravan arteries across the Rub al-Khali, showing that the lost city was also a web, the meeting node of roads that stitched Arabia into the Mediterranean and Indian Ocean worlds, a network you can only appreciate from the sky. Fly north and west over Arabia, and another kind of pattern emerges: vast V-shaped funnels and starbursts of dry stone walls, some kilometers long, called desert kites, built to corral and mass hunt wild animals across open country. Thousands of these structures now dot satellite maps of Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and Syria, denser and more varied than aerial surveyors ever suspected a century ago. And many have been rebuilt in phases that trace cultural continuity across millennia of climate swings. Entangled with the kites are long rectangular enclosures called mustatils, Neolithic stone monuments that run in chains across lava fields and sand plains, vast ritual landscapes whose purposes are only now being pried open by excavation and isotopic analysis. Alone on the ground, you could stand inside a mustatil and fail to grasp it. From a satellite pass, it slots into a constellation of rectangles stretching to the horizon. The power of space. Archaeology isn't only in finding a single wall, it's in restoring the scale, the way one structure calls to another across leagues of desert. Keep that bird's eye view, and another truth comes into focus. Empires win deserts by mastering sight lines and water lines. Declassified spy images and modern satellites have dotted the steppe with Roman and Hanara forts and beacons where nothing seemed to be before. Tiny squares, whose spacing matches the distance a unit could march in a day, or the limit a fire signal could be trusted across heat-shimmering air. In Iran and Central Asia, low linear swales betray qanats, underground aqueducts that slide from foothills into fields, invisible from the road, but obvious in elevation models and thermal maps because buried galleries breathe differently than the surface. What the satellites keep teaching is simple and humbling. The best way to read a desert is from above, and when you do, political and hydraulic logic leaps off the screen. Even in the Nile Valley, where life floods the land each year, the past can hide a meter down, neatly sliced under modern fields and villages. Infrared surveys have flagged rectilinear blocks and streets scrolled under the silt. Ancient towns whose stones retain heat longer through the evening, painting faint thermal ghosts that careful analysts can tease from satellite time lapses. Radar and elevation models add the rest. Enclosure walls as shallow berms, harbor basins as subtle depressions, causeways as barely raised threads that, taken together, sketch a city no one has seen for 1,000 years. Remote sensing turns blind, digging into targeted recovery, and protects what we don't yet know is there by giving us a map to avoid damaging it en route to what we seek most. Outside the Nile corridor, the Sahara itself has yielded to space-borne mapping, revealing blueprints for climates past. Paleo river valleys as wide as modern highways, megalake shorelines tracing perfect arcs across today's sand seas, and buried deltas splayed beneath dunes like frozen lightning. In the west, the Tamanrasset system, an enormous river that once drained the central Sahara, has been traced offshore and on, with radar and altimetry, connecting the dots between submarine canyons and inland channels. In the northeast, dry channels thread beneath dunes toward the Nile, cross-hatched with old tributaries that likely carried people, herds, and ideas when the Sahara breathed green. This is more than scenery. It is a living index to the corridors our ancestors traveled when the climate's dial was set to a different station. All of these threads lead to a single revelation you've been waiting for. In 2024, researchers stitched together satellite, radar, high-resolution elevation, geophysical surveys, and sediment cores to map an extinct 64-kilometer branch of the Nile, running at the foot of the Western Desert Plateau, directly along the Pyramid Belt from Lisht through Dahshur and Saqqara to Giza. They named it the Aramat branch, Aramat meaning pyramids in Arabic, because that's what it explains. Why so many pyramids sit in a line near the desert edge, and how their builders could deliver stone at scale without dragging millions of blocks across loose sand. The proposed course hugs the base of the escarpment, with inlets and paleo harbors aligning with known causeways and valley temples, implying waterfront construction zones where barges could moor and crews could transship materials straight up to the building platforms. Cores and geomorphic evidence suggests that during the Old Kingdom, this branch was deep and navigable, perhaps a quarter-mile wide in places, and that its demise came gradually as rainfall waned, sand advanced, and the river's energy shifted eastward. A long environmental arc echoed in the political upheavals that followed. The team's interpretation doesn't just tidy a map, it changes the narrative from miracle haulage to intelligent logistics, framed by a geography now hidden under farms and dunes, a working river that silently slipped from memory until satellites traced its ghost. News summaries captured the punchline. A now extinct stretch of the Nile once flowed close to Egypt's Great Pyramid and likely played a key role in the construction of ancient monuments. But the raw science is even more compelling. The alignment of ports, causeways, and floodplains that makes the whole landscape legible again, 3,000 years after the water left. If there was one lost river beside the pyramids, there will be others. Smaller distributaries, cut-off meanders, and bank lines that match gaps in the archaeological record and point to yet undiscovered temples and towns under the fields. The same tools that outline the Aramat branch can sketch harbor basins drowned in silt, quay walls buried by cultivation, and feeder canals the length of a village street, each one a breadcrumb to a story we couldn't see on the ground. Across Arabia and the Sahara, similar stacks of radar and elevation will keep brightening the old caravan veins and ritual complexes that make lonely stones suddenly belong to a network, not a mystery. And each time we integrate these maps with climate records, drought pulses, dust flux, shoreline retreat, we don't just locate a site, we place it on a living timeline where environment and ingenuity wrestle in public view. From the sky, deserts stop being empty and start being honest. The fortress at Shisar is no longer a puzzle when you can follow a dozen ancient roads to its gate. The kites and mustatils are not curiosities when you see how many they are and how they line the land like architecture for gods and herds alike. And the pyramids, for all their wonder, turn out to be not isolated miracles in the sand, but monuments built along a working waterway, planned with the river's muscle in mind, as practical as they are. Sublime satellites didn't give us a myth. They gave us back a map, one that lets us read what the wind tried to erase and what time tried to bury. If this changed how you picture the ancient world, tell us which discovery surprised you most. And stay tuned, because every month the dunes move a little and the data gets sharper, and history, stubborn as it is, keeps coming back into view.